Well, a few folks I recognize. For folks that are there at Cisco, I actually used to be at Cisco for about 20 years. And then 3 years ago, I moved over to Microsoft. Just in terms of my background, I've spent almost all of my career in support. So the first 6 years or so I spent inside of engineering. I like to say I spent all my time in engineering creating the bugs that I had to go then fix when I showed up in support later. So that's just me, paying for my sins of writing, fast business. But what I wanted to share with you all today is just a little bit of the Microsoft journey on how we've been using Gen AI, and a lot of the lessons learned. And one thing about lessons is you don't know that you're about to learn them when you're going through that process. And so, the things that I'm going to actually dive into are not so much the technology, but all of the things that we had to grapple with around the technology to make it work as we were rolling Gen AI out. And again, if you've got questions, just pop them in chat. So let me go ahead and advance one more. And just to check that what I'm sharing is what you guys are seeing, do you see a geographic map of the globe on the right?
We do.
Yes. Yep. Oh, and was that a hands up? Did I see somebody with a hand up?
Yes.
All right, thumbs up. All right, awesome. So just a bit of a page on the size of Microsoft support. We had a audacious goal that we were asked to go solve for, and that was how do we roll out generative AI to our entire support community. And if you look at the throughput that we cover at the bottom, we do about 145 million tickets every year, and that's across a variety of modalities that this team of individuals probably experiences. So we take cases through chats, through emails, and through calls, through your traditional IVR systems. And it's across all of the ecosystem technologies that you see there in the middle. So we like to say that we take cases everywhere from Xbox all the way up to quantum computing. So, your Azure, Office, Teams, et cetera. And then we're distributed, highly geographically. And so we've got about 92 contact centers in 120 countries. I always puzzle on how that's possible. And we do cases in about 46 different languages. In total, this is about 43,000 engineers that consist of both our primary FTE basis as well as what we call delivery partners. So partners that many of the companies here probably leverage as well. And so when we thought about what if we could get Gen AI right instead of support, there could be a really big force multiplier thing happening. But I wanted to say that before we knew that Gen AI was going to happen, back in 2019, we actually realized that we had a challenge, and this is a challenge that I know many individuals grapple with in this organization. But we actually started to look at how do we take our different systems. So we had 16 different ticketing systems. Inside of those systems, about 500 different tools from different vendors. And we realized that we needed to actually consolidate them into something a lot less than 16 different systems. And some of the reasons for, and again, this is a Gen AI story, but it was really around getting ready for Gen AI. Some of the reasons for why we needed to consolidate was, if you look at a lot of the technical cases that we take now, they're not just, in a specific vertical. And so, a customer will call in and they'll say, hey, my e-commerce application is not working. Well, that e-commerce application could be triangulated to a couple of issues. It could be compute, it could be storage, it could be networking, or it could be the customer's third-party licenses. And so having a system where we could collaborate back and forth just became really, really important for us. And so in 2019, we did make this decision to consolidate into one ticketing system. And again, like, I wish I had a crystal ball. You know, we did not make that decision because we knew that Gen AI was coming, but we made that decision for some of the reasons that I mentioned earlier. I'll say that if I knew Gen AI was coming, I would have invested a lot more in NVIDIA. So I'm not sure if you guys are feeling that way as well, but just, you know, I'm glad that we made some of these decisions. And I'm not going to spend so much time on some of the quantitative values that you see there on the right. I'm happy to talk about it, but I want to share some of it, again, our lessons learned on what we kind of wish that we had done differently when we were rolling out Gen AI, which we call Copilot, by the way, to our agents. So I'm just going to pause and see if any questions from the team before I start to talk about like the specific features that our agents are using and how they're using them. No, okay. So the first 5, when we looked at kind of, you know, what were going to be our design principles when we were rolling out Gen AI into support, like, that was really important to start with. Because if you don't, then you can kind of get into this, what I call spray and pray kind of scenario, where you start dabbling in different features, but you don't really hone in on, you know, making, you know, the first core features really stick. And so the design principle, the first one that we had was, how do we accelerate our agents' time to proficiency? So speeding their onboarding period. You know, there's a phrase that I've heard people talk about, you know, how do you make your newest agent as good as your best agent? Now, that is a very, very lofty goal. And again, for somebody who has spent their entire life inside of technology and figuring out how technology works, but also how technology breaks, you can't just, you know, use the technology to make, you know, somebody who's 2 to 3 months enroll as effective as somebody who's been doing it for 20 years. However, you know, when you look at the ramp time traditionally of 7 to 8 months for, you know, an engineer to start to be more independent, you can make some substantial inroads. And, you know, how do they have access to information? So that was design principle number 1. How do we speed the onboarding? The second that we had, and this is so important, is how do we remove toil from our agents and our support engineers? You know, we know now, especially, that our technology gurus, they've got choices on, you know, companies that they work for. And so, you know, how do we truly use this technology as a way to support them? So often you hear this from our support engineers, that our tools leave much to be desired. And by the way, like, that was a thing at Cisco, as well as Microsoft, as well as the places I was at before Cisco and Microsoft. And so I'm sure that's also a similar experience that you guys get. So how can we really remove that toil for our engineers? And then the third and the fourth one, the third one was, how do we streamline access to information for our engineers? We have inside of Microsoft over 450,000 different knowledge management articles across all of those technology verticals I talked about earlier. So, you know, how do you make it such that people don't have to go create bookmarks, you know, that go 404 at some point? And then the fourth design principle, and this is, we're not there yet, this is aspirational, but, you know, how do you help the customer to be able to self-serve, you know, potentially without as much, agent or engineer participation. That fourth one, we are looking at, but our focus was really how do we start with features that increase productivity to help our agents who are helping our customers. And so with that was really how we came up with these first 5 features. And so where we have focused is primarily in both chat as well as email. So, for, kind of concentration, about 95% of our engagements are through email or through chat. We don't do as much around, pure IVR of somebody calling in. A lot of that stuff usually tends to be consumer. So that's why all of these features focused on both the sort of efficiency that you can produce inside of the case and helping to resolve the case. But I want to just kind of click into a few of the reasons for why we started these and also how it's generating benefit for us. So the first one that we use is that case summarization feature. And so for that, I actually want to just do a quick into that just to share. I think many organizations here probably run a follow the sun model. Inside of Cisco, I remember there was a managed service entity that we had that was 24/7. Nobody likes the graveyard shift. So with the follow the sun model, obviously it creates a lot of efficiencies in terms of people being able to work their waking hours, but it also, as we know, creates this huge annoyance where when you're passing off the cases to the next shift, customers know that experience of, what happens when, say, Sydney or Penang picks up that case and that engineer starts to ask some of the same questions that were already asked. That is both an annoyance for the customer. In fact, that's probably one of the most common bits of feedback that we get is, the problems with the case handovers. But the second thing where case summarization has really helped us is on both escalation cases and when we have to basically engage through collaborations. So, like, for example, I was out in Dallas in our Las Colinas contact center a couple of weeks ago, and there was a escalation engineer that picked up a case that was about 120 days old. I know it happens. And that case log was just pages and pages and pages of information. A lot of our escalation engineers prior to Copilot, what they would actually do, especially if they were like escalation managers, is they would have individuals that would actually go through all of the case log to kind of create a case summarization for them to digest. And so that has really cut the time and the toil, right? I don't know if you guys have ever had to do a postmortem on a case. I've done it and it's awful. I hate doing it. So this has actually become so much better for me. What it does for me is it helps to get me started on, how to craft it. I'm not having to deal from, a blank piece of paper, on a case where we've got, executives that are involved. The second thing around case summarization that has just been really helpful for us, and actually this is just a quote you can see here on the right, is we embrace this whole idea of know me. And, depending on the customer, if the customer's a big customer, they want you to know their architecture. They want you to know how it's been architected for their requirements. And maybe they want you to know some of the contextual information. And so in this scenario, being able to know that you've got an energy utility who's just rebuilding after an ice storm, so that when you're taking cases from them, you want to treat them a little bit more sensitively. And so one thing that's interesting about Know Me is a lot of our go-to-market offers. As customers expect a higher know me experience, they also pay more for it. And so this is where the technology is very interesting in terms of how it's able to provide a higher level of service without more headcount. We're not having to staff with FTEs that know, this particular customer's, e-commerce, setup. I mentioned already how it's great for case handoffs. Got it. Sorry, Tamara, just seeing your comment on the handoffs on the presenters. Not sure if there's a comment there for me. But one thing I do want to call out on what we learned on case summarization is when it's not appropriate. And so, some of the forensic case audits. So when we're looking at specific outcomes, we don't, use Copilot or GenAI for that. We may use it as a starting point, but we will go back and do the fine-tooth introspection of what we missed. And so I just want to pause and see the feature of case summarization. Any questions on that? Any kind of similar experiences that you guys have had that you wanted to dialogue on?
I do have a question, and maybe you did cover this, but is the summarization? Can you hear me?
I'll tell you what. Maybe if you get closer to the mic, or somebody can relay your question.
Here, I'll lift you up.
I hope we didn't lose the WebEx.
Do you guys still hear the room?
No.
No, I'm on the WebEx.
No.
I'm saying I hope we didn't lose them.
There, try again.
Rajat,
Okay, is that better?
I was curious, folks in WebEx,
There
can
they
you
are.
hear me clearly, by the way?
Is that better? Okay, so the
Maybe.
question
Go ahead,
was,
I hear you now.
okay, is case summarization only for internal? And if it summarizes for external or the customer, does it exclude private notes?
Great point. It is internal only. Internal only, which makes it, I mean, and again, like when our engineers are doing the work, they put in things in there that are appropriate, right? Sometimes there will be PII information in there, but it is all private and internal to Microsoft. So,
Thank you.
Hey, Jennifer,
hey,
one other question. Do you also use the case summarization for perhaps generating outbound knowledge articles for customers, or, based on what's going on here, here's a proposed article to publish?
yeah, great question. So what we actually use so we use, instead of case summarization, so let me actually go back to one of the features. So for outbound recommendations to customers, we use Copilot to draft emails and to draft chat responses. Now, we don't actually use GenAI yet or Copilot yet to generate knowledge management articles. What we do instead is, the 450,000 KM articles that we've ingested into our corpus, we have Answer Assist. And so for that, what that does is in the ticketing system, we've got that conversational interface where it will provide recommendations. So say you're upgrading VMs, it will provide a set of recommended steps. And then what the agent can do is they can actually tell Answer Assist to please take that information and draft it into an email for sharing with the customer, or drafting it into a chat to share with the customer. Now, one thing that we mandate is the agent or the engineer is always in the loop, right? And so they need to make sure that this is appropriate before they send it over to the customer. Does that answer your question, or does it create extra questions for you?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And then the first.
Hey, Jennifer.
Go ahead, please.
Sorry, go ahead. I think I spoke
please.
over somebody.
Oh.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Christiane Hilkner from IBM. We're experiencing similar usages of case summarization, and it was interesting to see your recommendation on not to use. So I need to take that back and look at it further. So thank you. But my question was, were there any best practices in terms of adoption?
Yes.
And what I mean, like accelerate adoption. I guess I really mean something like that.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, yes, yes. In fact, let me actually jump straight to that, if you guys will permit me for that. And if we can actually go back to this. So, by the way, this is very relevant to what I'm going to talk about in terms of change. You see, in some of the things that we learned around making sure that the outputs are valuable, because if they're not valuable, your engineers are not going to use it. They're going to say this thing is worthless. And so we talk a lot about garbage in, garbage out. So Copilot is fed your knowledge. And actually, let me just go ahead and jump to some of the best practices in landing the change, and then we can go back to some of the things that we learned around knowledge. I'm first going to talk about how we used to land change. And it will probably generate a little bit of a chuckle because you guys know what this looks like. The way that we used to land change is we would tell our support agents, our 40,000 support agents, we'd send them an email and we'd say, there's a new tool coming. You need to use it, and we're going to send you to training. Please choose 3 of these trainings that you need to attend, and take the training. And so then what would happen is our agents that work in queue, they've got customers to take care of. Perhaps they missed one of those 3 trainings. And so then we'd follow up, in a couple of weeks, and we'd say, we noticed that you didn't take the training. You need to take the training. It's very important, entering, reasons X, Y, and Z. And of course, you know what happens, busy, taking care of customers, doing their job, they don't get around to it. And by the way, the emails are usually like 3 pages long with the, truly things of what you need to do at the very last part of the email. And then the managers start to get copied on, oh, by the way, you're, 7 or 8 of your support engineers have failed to take this training. If it's not done by this date, then, we're going to flag them for whatever. So at that point, the managers are now chasing after the engineers to take the training on the new tool. So at this point, you now have support agents or support engineers that are hacked off. They don't know why they need to take the training. And they are now doing what I call being compliant as opposed to being committed to really understanding and using the technology. And that is what we attempted to do. And we realized, especially with a lot of the anxiety that is associated around Gen AI, that we needed to do things dramatically different. So I'm just going to check. And again, it's so awkward, talking to a room where I can't see and hear. But does that resonate with you guys in terms of how you guys traditionally roll out technology training and changes to your support community?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep, very much so.
Yeah. All right. So we were about to go through that process. And what we noticed, and I have some rant numbers. In fact, I'm going to show it to you. So notice here. So notice back in March, April, how low our adoption was, right? This is where we realized something needed to change. So about May, we implemented the system I'm about to talk to you about now. So the first thing that we did was we brought in our support leaders. So across all of our verticals, across Azure, across Dynamics, across Teams, we made sure that our support leaders were bought in to what we were doing. And I mean, I'll say this, like, you know, when I was in support, like, you know, delivering support or delivering customer success, I had a really big influence over whether or not my team would do things, just based upon the way in which I talked about it. And so making sure that the leaders felt informed and that they felt heard and that they were connected to that whole process. They didn't want to feel like things were being foisted on them. And so that was the most important thing for us first. And we wanted to also make sure that we were providing them with the data and the assets that they felt that they needed to talk confidently about what this is with their communities. One of the things that we realized is, you know, even the support leaders were a little bit skeptical and a bit afraid of Gen AI and what it meant. So that was number one. But the second one, this is that little bubble there in the middle. That was around how do we truly build awareness and a sense of community. And we created this whole concept called a Spark Week. And this is where people that do not look like me in a jacket, individuals from our 92 contact centers actually run the events where they talk about, across those 5 features that I mentioned, they talk about how they use it. We also basically broke it down into different sort of modalities for people to engage with. One of the things that we realized is a lot of these Spark Weeks, it was, nobody can devote 2 days out of their work week to just sit in a room and learn. And so we broke it into smaller items. So quick learning bites that they could engage with. And again, like, these are sessions that are led, devised, hosted, all by the local teams. What we did is we provided, and we're providing now just the facilitator kits for the individuals in the community to run it. And we're there for corporate support. We provide the t-shirts, but, you know, having it hosted locally just really creates this sense of engagement. And then the second thing that happens is we focus on what do we do past the Spark Weeks. And that is around the sustainable adoption beyond the first 2 days. What we actually notice is that when we go to the different areas, and we've not done all 92 contact centers, we've done about 12, but across all 12 of those Spark Weeks, we see noticeable spike in usage of those features. But one thing that we started to sometimes see is you'd see it start to drift off. And so what we do is we now start to build communities of both change champions, and these are change champions that do 2 things. We have 2 types of personas. One is the teacher persona, which is exactly what you think, individuals that want to teach and mentor. But then we also have what's called the innovator persona that we work on, because those, and you know what these personas look like. They're drastically different. I've hardly ever seen them occupied in one individual. So the people that are teaching are not always the individuals that are thinking about cool use cases for Copilot beyond just the initial use cases. And so for that, what we do is we promote and encourage just a broader community of sharing some of the best practices for how to teach, how to convey. Like, you've got, for example, teachers that are experts in prompting, or teachers that are great in just knowledge management, cleaning, or like working through making sure that the KM body is always up to date. And so that building of community, both in the moment with Spark Weeks, as well as the focus groups, as well as beyond, has just been really important. And then the last thing that we started to do is just building out a really strong listening ecosystem. And so for that, a few things. The first thing that we did was, by actually going to each of the sites and asking for feedback. Like that was really the first entry point. And so whenever we spend time at sites, so this week we're hosting the Spark Week for Redmond, we do the one-to-many conversations, but then we bring a focus group of individuals to say, hey, what's working? What would you like to see differently? And all of that feedback that we actually produce, we use GenAI to our favor. So we ingest all of that feedback. And then by the end of the Spark Week, we're actually able to say really quickly, here are all of the things that we heard from you. So we don't have to wait, 1 to 2 weeks afterwards to say, hey, here's what we heard. We use GenAI and Copilot to be able to do that. One thing on the listening ecosystem that's been just so helpful, and again, this probably is something that you guys can relate to, is I'm sure that there's times when people ask you for your feedback, but then they don't do anything about it. And that is so demotivating. I remember that, in my career. And so as a result, what it does is it's one thing not to ask, but it's another to, ask, but then not to do anything. And so when our agents and our engineers spend time to share that feedback with us, first of all, we acknowledge it. We say, thank you very much for sharing that. And we let them know how that feedback is being incorporated into how we are crafting or changing the product. And then when those enhancements come out, then we actually reach back out with them when they said, thank you very much for the feedback that you provided. It's now live in this particular modality. We'd like for you to let us know, did what you asked for connect with what we produced? And so it's basically a listening ecosystem with 3 contact points. And what we do is, we're really big on this whole idea of our support community is helping to shape the product. So you heard David White talking about the virtual TAC engineer. I bet those TAC engineers would feel pretty proud knowing that in some way they are helping to make that virtual TAC engineer possible. In fact, we go so far as to brand it. And so whenever we go out to our Spark Weeks, we have purple t-shirts that we give to our support engineers, and it says, I am building Copilot. And it does a couple of things. And so I just want to acknowledge some of the anxiety that I'd like to actually get some thoughts from the community here on how you're addressing some of the anxiety around Gen AI. What I have noticed is one way in which to take the concern down in the stress of, will this take my job, is to get the engineers and the support engineers engaged in the product itself, how to shape that product. I create space for them to learn it. It also dispels some of the worry that this is going to take their job. Somebody once told me, never meet your heroes, but for folks to actually start to engage with Gen AI or ChatGPT or any of these LLMs, you realize that there's tons of potential, but we're still very much in the infancy stage. And so that's been helpful for us. The thing that I just want to really impose upon and share is that point at the bottom is that all of the things that we're doing around rolling out this technology, it's all people focused. And that was a big sort of lesson learned. And it was also a little bit of humble pie because, again, we went about this the way that we traditionally went about technology rollouts, and we realized that we needed to dramatically change course. I just basically spoke a tome of War and Peace on driving usage through Community and Copilot. I'm going to shut up and see if you guys have got some questions on that we want to dialogue on. No?
So I'll say, Jennifer, that we're embarking. I don't think it's a similar mode, but I think we're, now we have some best practices here. On step 2, we're embarking on this notion of ambassador, who are really the ones that are going to simulate and understand how good the technology is for everybody's jobs, and then work throughout the community to ignite that versus imposing, right? You have to use it. Let me track, let me run the report, like you said. So, so the ambassadors will prevent that, right? So leverage and also help disseminate the culture about this is something good for your daily job, right? This is going to help your daily job and not, replace, what you do completely, right? So it's a similar notion, I think, in step 2, and I think we need to learn some I'll definitely take to the team some best practices here on, how you all expanded it and the results you all got. So this is really helpful. Thank you.
Yep. And if it's, I had this in here in backup, but this is, generally how we structure it. So we had, like, again, things that allowed people to check in at their convenience. So we did small 15-minute learning bite-sized sessions. And then we focused it around just the topics that were probably most important. And then we also had the managers also set up. And so we would do a Spark Week session for the users and the agents, but then also for the managers and the TAs. The other thing that was just so interesting was on just prompting. Like prompting, it's a different skill. And one of the things where we kind of like got an aha was you basically treat Copilot or Gen AI like it's somebody talking, right next to you. And so the way in which, so if you think about this, in fact, what we did is we were looking at all of the inputs into our Tech Assist entry point into Copilot, and they would use it like you would use keyword search. And so like a lot of the messages would be things like cannot see dialer or express route, because what you're doing is you're searching for articles, but instead, or VM11, and Tamara's got their hand up, but instead being able to treat it like an individual that you talk to, that generates so much more rich feedback. Tamara, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Do you mind if I take it a little bit different direction?
Yeah, of course.
I had a specific question. It probably haunts all of us in what we do. As you know, one of our biggest challenges is the customer's prone to reporting the product issue or technical impact, but they often don't report the business impact adequately. So we end up with escalations occurring. And of course, I'm on an escalations team. We get tons where if the engineer had that conversation with them earlier in the case lifecycle, we could have properly coded the case and raised severity and all that. How is AI, or is it yet being used to help the engineer with questioning skills around like the reported technical impact based on the product and things like that? Is that within reach yet?
It's getting there. In fact, you can start to see it in like the auto prompting. And so again, we're, around the design principles, it's how do you help reduce the agent toil? It's not like, just take the agent out of the loop. But one of the auto prompting questions is asking about business impact. And so what Tamara's talking about is for us, if we want to engage the product group with further troubleshooting, we have to be able to explain a business impact. And what we can actually do is we can build in the template of what Microsoft support engineers need to provide in a business impact statement. And so yes, it is there in the moment to be able to help with writing that for faster escalation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I saw somebody else had their hand up.
That's me. Hi, Jennifer. Can you hear? Okay.
I can hear, and I hit something and suddenly I can hear things much better, so.
Great. I appreciated your comments about feedback. I'm curious, just logistically, how do you all approach prioritizing the vast amount of feedback that comes along with these efforts?
Yes. It's such a great question. By the way, I was at a TSRA session a couple years ago, and they talked about this acronym called HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion, which is not what we want to use here. So actually what we do is when we talk about at Spark Week, how to write a really good request. So, talking about, hey, if this feature were implemented, it would generate this for me in terms of, improvement and whatever, being able to provide a quantifiable expression of that. So that's the first thing that we do is we ask for when people put in feedback into our listening system that they help us to build the ROI. But the second thing that we do is we've democratized our feedback. So we use something called Innovation Hub. It's a bit like, kind of wiki, or it's very much crowdsourced, where people can upvote on the bits of feedback that are submitted. And that does two things. One, it creates weight, and it creates just overwhelming support from people doing that, highest paid person's opinion thing that happens. But the other thing that it does is a lot of times, not sure if this is you, but like this is me, I will do this. I'll say, you know what? I think this thing would be a really cool feature, but I bet it's already been submitted. I'm busy, I'm not going to submit it. And so they now actually get to see, like, has that request already been submitted? So I don't know, does that help? And I'm also curious, like, how you manage that prioritization of feedback.
Same thing.
I don't know that we're doing a great job at it yet. There's, we have a couple of mechanisms. One across the company is that there was a hackathon that was specific to sourcing ideas in engineering. And everything that was generated and validated out of that exists in a JIRA project now. So there's visibility to all of those items in JIRA to at least hopefully help with duplication of effort right now, and to allow for those ideas to be assigned or tagged to other existing JIRA items where teams have already begun, or people with ideas or interest in that space can pile on rather than starting over. So I would say it's a very early space for us. And I'm going to talk a little bit later, but incorporating feedback into sort of our process of bet making is really what we're working to formalize more.
Yeah, that's cool. The other thing that we started to see too around and this is where Gen AI has been so effective, is like you were kind of talking about that scenario where you've got JIRA set up already, and then when you've got new ideas that get sourced from your community, how do you parcel it out to the team that's most suited to work on it. The Gen AI capabilities, I love for that because, for example, we would go to Sofia, Bulgaria, and we would go to Tokyo, and we would start to see recurring themes of, what our agents wanted to see. And, kind of the process that we used to go through was we would kind of like look at, okay, this bit of feedback, where does it go across, the different, 6 or 7 projects that we're working on. Now we can use Gen AI just to help us where, so we did Sofia, Bulgaria, and then we went to Tokyo, and the feedback from Tokyo, we could just say, hey, from the 2 days of recording the sessions of feedback, please create a new version of the set of requirements and inputs, from the existing corpus of information. By the way, we call it a snowball, by the way, like that's our little internal term. So this whole idea of a snowball that we keep like rolling around the world where like a set of feedback that we get from each of those Spark weeks, we like pack onto the snowball and then we just continue to roll it through. And obviously that snowball consists of features that we implement. By the way, when I talk about features, I'll mention this, and I'm not sure if this is how you guys are seeing this, but most of like about half of the requests aren't actually around just technological innovation. Like, don't get me wrong, it's there, it's definitely there, but it's a lot around like the extra processes and assets and systems that you use to help people get comfortable around it. So, and somebody just lowered their hand. Maybe it was because I answered your question, or maybe somebody just gave up on me asking them what their question is. So.
I just took mine down.
Okay, cool. I'm going to touch on this more thing around knowledge management that I think will just be hopefully helpful for you guys. One thing that we realized is, Copilot and Gen AI, it exposes weaknesses that already existed around knowledge management. Like KCS has been around forever. I remember back in managed services at, Cisco, that was one of my jobs was to make sure that our IP of knowledge was appropriate and up to date. And so how have we kind of started to implement a system for that? So remember how I talked about how we had 450,000 knowledge management articles. Well, when we first went about ingesting all of the knowledge management that we needed, the way that we did is we actually went to all of the support business units and we said, what are the assets that are really important to you? And so they gave us all of their KM articles that were helpful, that they thought that they would use. The original number was actually 1.1 million knowledge management articles, not 450,000. And what happened, you can imagine, is the outputs were inaccurate. The outputs originally had, what you guys all hear about of hallucinations. And so what we did is we dialed back the KM knowledge articles. We implemented just the quality of what is appropriate to ingest. And this is, like everything is always scrubbed for PII, but just what are the KM articles that are really, really valuable for agents to use. And that is so important. And what it's actually exposed is this need to really have, I'll actually go back to this one slide I wanted to touch on. Yes, so it's really focused on this idea of a role that is going to be focused on making sure that the KM articles are up to date. And so if you look at that paragraph at the bottom right, it's not an always-on role, it's a rotational role, but either a content curator or a librarian. So, an individual that is immersed in the technology that will, on a 6-month basis, play that role of making sure that, what we are ingesting into our KM corpus is up to date. That person also, what they do is they look at the feedback that we get. And so the other thing about feedback on our systems is whenever a agent or a support engineer engages in answer assist, what we ask them to do is we ask them to do either a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And we ask them to provide specific input on why that worked or didn't work. And again, back to that whole point around how they feel like they're a part of that listening ecosystem. A lot of times, I don't know if you guys feel this way, I feel this way, a lot of the website stuff that I do is like, I don't engage on the, hey, was this website great? Because I don't feel like it's actually going to be addressed. And so those librarians, those content curators, when you know that there is somebody that you work with inside of your Azure support team that is on the other end receiving your content of thumbs up, thumbs down, and that they are going to be accountable to making the knowledge management better, you have this kind of really cool symbiotic accountability thing going on. And so that's been one thing around knowledge management that has just been really important for us. The second thing that we also realized around knowledge is knowledge is a little bit like a grocery store. So bear with me for a second. You'll see where I'm going in a moment. Not all KM articles have the same expiration date. So, if you think about some of our on-premise older technology, those KM articles, they don't need to be refreshed or reviewed, every 6 months or every 3 months. Whereas things that are much more leading edge technology, like our Azure capabilities or even our Copilot capabilities, those things, the knowledge management articles have a much shorter life cycle. And so they have to be refreshed and accessed much more frequently. And so when we think about how we're going to staff for content curators, you have to staff more, and you have to set expectations that they're going to need to do more sort of touches to make sure that the newer technology KM articles are up to date and relevant. And again, that's all for this aid of how do you make sure that the output is valuable for your agents. So just checking to see if that's triggered any questions. And I also acknowledge I've got about 4 minutes left in my session.
How well do you feel the rotation, when somebody comes out of that rotation of being the knowledge curator for 6 months? Is that something that they enjoy that experience, or are they worn out and burned out and that's why you have a rotation?
It's a great question. This is not like an off-ramp role. This is a 6-month rotation. I think Google uses the term, I think the bungee rotation. I heard that term speak, but it is a rotation. You want people that know the technology, and you want people that are going to be hands-on to craft technology. And so it is not the off-ramp type of persona. I would actually propose individuals that want the next level, that are ready for the promotion, that want to provide impact beyond taking their cases. Those are the individuals that you want to potentially look at for this role. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, look, I will leave it here. Paul, I wish I could have been there in person with you guys. Again, this is a road we are learning tons about. We will learn tons more. I will leave it with this one last thing that we did just around how we made it fun. This stuff is not obvious. And so one of the things that we did was we rolled out a game, actually. So last summer, we rolled out a game called Season of AI Love. So you see that picture on the right. That actually was created by Copilot, where we gamified it. Our engineers are super competitive just as a way to help, one, get people engaged in a way that was kind of surprising, and bring along some of those like vocal detractors to help win their hearts and minds. And so with that, I'll stop sharing and see if there's any parting comments from Paul or anybody in the room or on WebEx.
If there's any more questions?
This is great.
You got a thumbs up on it. It was a great session.
Thank
Okay.
you.
I say we'll let Jennifer Portman, thank you very much.